Do you want to learn how you can combine traditional paper collage as well as some digital collage techniques to create some really cool mixed media artwork? Then in today's video, I am going to be combining both of those techniques alongside painting to create a really cool movie poster design. And I'll be sharing with you my process and how you can create your own collage mixed media work, as well as using some tileable, seamless, repeating pattern designs as well. This is the second video in a series I'm doing where I am redesigning movie posters. The first video I did was redesigning the Titanic poster, so there'll be a link in the description for you to check that out after you've watched this one. The movie I'm going to be redesigning today is Midsommar. It's got an A up, Midsommar. Directed by Ari Aster, who also did Hereditary. So the first thing that I'm going to do is have a quick look at the original poster and do a bit of an analysis to see the things that I might change when I redesign mine. Quick disclaimer, this isn't me saying that their poster is really bad and that I'm going to create something so much better. It's just a fun art challenge. Now, I'm not going to lie, I actually really like the original poster, although there's a few elements that I want to play around with in my design. I really like the use of the flower crown at the top of the image, and I want to further that use of flowers in my design by using the kind of collage techniques which we'll get into. I also think the tagline of "Let the festivities begin" works really well, and I think the smaller text with the large line spacing is really effective and something that I think I want to incorporate into my poster. I think the only thing that I would change are the colours. I really like the yellow and blue combo, but I feel the skin tone is kind of too yellow and it feels slightly off. But then this film is uneasy and wacko, so that could just be feeding into the overall tone of the film. It's probably a deliberate decision. Like I said, I want to include the flowers as a focus in my designs because then I can use the collage techniques as well. So how could I not use this iconic shot from the film as the basis for my poster design? Which means I think I'm actually going to create a landscape poster rather than a portrait like I did in my previous video. Okay, so I decided to paint the portrait of Florence Pugh first and then I'll collage on top of it. I'm using acrylic paints for this on cartridge paper. My biggest challenge for this painting was the lighting. I don't really remember the last time that I painted a portrait in direct sunlight, so it was quite difficult to maintain a contrast between the light side of the face and the darker side of the face when actually in the original image there isn't that much contrast in itself, because overall the shot is quite soft and even. So this meant I had to be a bit more creative by using colour contrast instead of your usual light and dark contrast. So I used this bright yellow colour to create more of a tone variation. I wanted to use this scene as the basis for my poster because, for one, Florence Pugh is an amazing actor and her facial expressions in this scene are just like top notch. Hats off to her. But what I also really love is that this shot is full of bright colours. This film, for the most part, is shot during the day, and there are really bright colours within that in the production design, in the cinematography, in the costumes. And this is a complete 180 of the usual stereotypes of the horror genre. So because this is such a key part of the film, I really wanted to translate this into my poster design. So now it's time to start collaging. I got these gardening magazines off of my mum, and I went through and I marked the pages which I thought had really interesting flowers that could be used within the crown and the dress in this image. I then went through and cut all of these out, and I'm not gonna lie, it took a long time and it was slightly tedious, but I just put on some Netflix and it was fine. When you're picking out what it is that you want to collage, you want to make sure you include a variety of elements. Look at things like the size. You want different sizes, you want different colours, you want different types of flowers, or whatever it is that you are collaging. You want a variety. And then when it comes to actually sticking them down on your paper, for me, I'm just using a Pritt stick. You could use something like PVA glue if you wanted to as well. You just want to make sure that you're varying the position of the different elements. You don't want all of the big elements in one area, and you don't want everything of the same colour in another area. You want to spread it out to make it more cohesive. I started with the biggest flower flowers first and stuck them down in different positions around the piece, because otherwise it would have looked quite jarring if I stuck these down last. They would stick out because they were so big. And I wanted to give the appearance of layers and depth, so that's why I'm starting with the biggest ones first. I then worked on top of this, roughly working from the largest pieces to the smallest elements, but not exclusively. I noticed I seem to have a lot more purples than a lot of the other colours, so I needed to make sure for the brighter colours that feature on the original shot, like the yellows and reds, that I place them down last and in strategic positions to bring the attention towards them, to give the appearance that there's more of that colour than there actually is. If you don't want to commit to sticking things down straight away and just sort of winging it as you go along, that's fine. You can do what I did, which is lay down all of your elements first, then take a photograph of that, which you can then reference when you go forward, and then stick everything down. I was considering just painting the background the same as it is in the original shot, but I don't think that's very sort of postery enough. So instead, I'm going to be creating my own tiled, seamless, repeating pattern design, which I can then collage onto my design. For my seamless, repeating pattern design, I actually referenced the artwork that you can see within the movie. And I decided to choose the colours of white and blue because it matches what the costumes are in the film as well. So to start, I simply just drew out my design on a small piece of paper. It doesn't actually particularly matter whether it's square or rectangular, just make sure that your design doesn't go over the edge of the piece of paper. I then flipped over, marked the vertical centre line and cut it in half. I then took the right hand piece and swapped it and put it on the left hand side. On the now right hand piece, I just marked halfway down from the top of the piece of paper. Then using the now left hand piece, you want to move it so the top of it is in line with the centre of the other side. Then tape them together. You then want to cut off the piece at the bottom which is overhanging. You then need to take that piece that you just cut and put it in the space to create the full size paper again and tape it in place. Turn it back over and you have your repeatable tile. Depending on your design, you may have some blank spaces in the middle of your tile. If that's the case, then take your pencil or pen and draw in and fill in the gaps. You then want to photograph or scan your design and put it onto your computer. You'll be able to do this in practically any photo editing software. I'm going to be using Photoshop. I imported my photo and firstly I went about just touching up the original image. I adjusted the levels to make it a bit more brighter, and then I used the stamp tool to remove the cut lines from the paper. To be honest, I would recommend, if you can, to scan your design in because it's a lot easier to work with a scanned image than a photographed image in the touch-up stage. I then decided to add a threshold adjustment to split my image into two tones, black and white. Then under the Select tab, use the Color Range option to select all of the white of the paper. I then deleted them so I would just have my black design on a transparent background. I then changed the colour back to blue and used the brush tool to fix up parts of the design that didn't fully translate with the threshold adjustment. You can then copy the layer and start tiling them together, creating your repeating pattern design for as long as you want to. And there you have a seamless repeating pattern tile design. So now it was time to assemble my poster together, collaging my repeating pattern design with the traditional collage that we did earlier. So I started by taking a photo of my original mixed media painting collage and I imported it into Photoshop and I cut out the background. I also then scaled it to be on a 30 by 40 inch size canvas, which is the standard landscape poster size known as quad. The next thing I did was then put in a background colour. So I put in this sort of pale yellow colour because it sort of matched the tones of the skin as well in the lighter areas. What I then did is I added a stone texture on top of that, which I put on colour burn. Then I also lowered the opacity to about 60%. I then wanted to sort of frame the poster a bit more, so I added in a kind of a white rectangle. Again, I lowered the opacity to about 80% so you could sort of see some of that texture coming through behind. Then it was time to add in my repeated tiled pattern. What I then did was added a curves layer just to sort of up the contrast a bit more on Florence Pugh. And then I decided to actually add the pattern as an overlay on Florence Pugh herself. So I added this over the top and obviously lowered the opacity to about 40% and I changed the blending mode to difference. Then it was time to start adding some of the text. So I began by adding the main text, Midsommar, and for this I'm using a font called Concurso Modern. I also added the small print billings at the bottom, which I created using a font called Steel Tongs, as well as adding the catchphrase, "Let the festivities begin," although this font was just regular Times New Roman. Then I also added the billing of Florence Pugh, which was the font Bell Gothic Standard, as well as an Ari Aster film at the very top, which is the same font as Midsommar. I then sort of thought, well, the text doesn't really kind of stand out that much against the patterned background. What I did was I added, using sort of like a purple-ish colour, I used the brush, it's on 0% hardness, and I just painted in behind the text and lowered the opacity to, again, about 40%. And as you can see, it really just makes the text pop out so much more. For kind of poster purposes, I added in the logos of the production companies, the distributor, so I've got A24 and E-Reel Films. And that's how you can collage traditional elements as well as digital elements to create your own artwork. And here is the final poster. I'm super happy with this one, and I think the collage worked really well to give this illustrated feel that links into the style of the overall film. Be sure to check out the first video in this series, there's a link in the description and in the cards above. And let me know what you think of my poster design in the comments below. And I'd love to hear any suggestions you have for any film posters you'd like me to redesign. If you did enjoy this video, please consider subscribing to my channel, as it would really help me out and so you don't miss out on weekly videos every Sunday. Thanks for watching. Bye. Midsommar. How to pronounce Midsommar?
Midsommar.
I swear she was English. She is English? What? She sounds so American. She is. Hold up. She's English, but she sounds so American. Okay, I think it's just Midsommar.